Abandoned at the altar, she married a millionaire CEO stranger, then discovered he was her secretary boss. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's return to our main character. Claire Whitman stands at the front of a small white chapel just outside Boston. Her fingers curled tightly around a bouquet she can barely feel anymore. The scent of fresh roses mixing with the low hum of whispered conversations behind her. And for a moment, she tells herself this is just pre-wedding nerves. That any second now the heavy wooden doors will open and the man she has loved for 3 years will walk down the aisle, smile at her, and make this humiliation in her chest disappear. But the doors stay closed. The clock on the wall ticks past the scheduled time, and her phone vibrates softly in her palm, the screen lighting up with a single message that steals the air from her lungs. I can't do this. I'm sorry. And nothing else. No explanation, no call, no attempt to face her. Just silence wrapped in a sentence that feels heavier than the stone walls around her. And as the guests begin to shift uncomfortably, Claire feels every eye turn toward her, pity sharp and unavoidable. Her mother frozen in the front pew, her bridesmaids unsure whether to step forward or pretend nothing is wrong. And in that moment Claire realizes this is not just a breakup. This is a public collapse, the kind that follows you long after the music stops, because walking away would mean admitting she was abandoned, admitting that she believed in someone who did not choose her back, and yet standing there hurts just as much, her mind racing through the consequences she cannot outrun, the non-refundable deposits, the apartment lease tied to a future that no longer exists, the job she only just secured as an executive secretary on a probation contract she cannot afford to lose, and the quiet fear that this altar is not the end of her story but the beginning of how people will remember her, the woman left behind, the woman who was not enough. And when the doors finally open, it is not her groom who steps inside, but a stranger in a dark coat, rain clinging to his shoulders, pausing when he sees her alone at the altar, and Claire turns away, swallowing hard, refusing to let one more man see her break, until a calm voice speaks softly from a respectful distance, asking if she needs a moment, offering an umbrella, not pity, not curiosity, just steadiness. And she does not look at him yet, because if she does she might cry, and she has already given this room enough of her tears. But outside the chapel, as the rain begins to fall and the guests slowly disperse, Claire's life quietly splits into a before and an after, and she has no idea that the stranger standing a few feet away, giving her space, watching her with a gaze that is careful and unreadable, is about to make her an offer that will change everything, not with romance, not with promises, but with a question that will force her to choose between disappearing under the weight of her shame or stepping into a future she never imagined. Claire Whitman leaves the chapel with borrowed flats in her hand and mascara streak just enough to remind her this is real, not a nightmare she can wake up from. The rain easing into a thin mist as she walks the half-mile to the small apartment she once shared with plans that no longer exist, every step counting the losses she cannot undo. The 3 months of rent paid in advance from savings she scraped together working late nights. The credit card balances tied to wedding deposits that will not be refunded. The quiet agreement with her parents that she would finally be settled, finally safe. And now the voicemail waiting on her phone from the landlord reminding her that the lease renewal decision is due by Friday. A deadline that feels like a wall closing in, because without a second income the numbers do not work. They never will. And when she reaches her apartment and sits on the edge of the bed still in her dress, she opens her laptop and checks her bank account, the balance, blinking back at her like an accusation. Enough for groceries and gas, not enough for mistakes, not enough for grace, not enough for a future that can absorb shock. And her thoughts drift to the job she starts again on Monday, executive secretary on a 90-day probation at a midtown office building she barely knows. A position she fought for after months of interviews. A job where one wrong move could mean immediate replacement. Because there are always others waiting, younger, cheaper, less complicated. and she presses her palms into her eyes, reminding herself that showing up is non-negotiable, that heartbreak does not excuse missed deadlines or visible weakness, because survival has rules and none of them include falling apart. The hours pass, and the silence grows louder, punctured only by a text from her mother asking if she is home safe and a message from a bridesmaid offering wine and sympathy, both of which Claire reads and does not answer, not because she is ungrateful, but because answering would make this permanent, would turn today into a story instead of a wound she can keep covered. And later that night, she lays the ruined dress across the chair like evidence and changes into sweatpants, opening the folder she keeps for emergencies, the one labeled just in case. Inside are copies of her resume, a list of monthly expenses written in neat ink, and the probation contract from work with a line highlighted that reads termination without cause, and she understands then, with painful clarity, that this is not about pride or embarrassment. This is about leverage, or the lack of it, because being left at the altar did not just break her heart. It stripped her of margin, of the buffer that allows people to make choices instead of taking what is offered. And she thinks of the stranger from earlier, the calm in his voice, the way he did not stare or rush her, the way he stood like he was not trying to rescue her, but also not walking away, and she shakes her head, pushing the thought aside. Because strangers do not solve problems like this. Contracts do not appear out of kindness, and miracles are for people with room to believe in them. But as midnight passes, and she lies awake staring at the ceiling, listening to the distant traffic, Claire admits the truth she has been avoiding since the chapel doors stayed closed. She cannot afford dignity right now. She cannot afford to wait for things to feel right. And whatever comes next will not be chosen because it is romantic or safe. It will be chosen because it keeps her standing, because it buys time, because time is the one thing she is left to negotiate with. The next morning, Claire Whitman returns to the chapel to retrieve what is left behind. The coordinator handing her a cardboard box with practice sympathy, veil folded too neatly, programs untouched, and as she steps back outside, the sky is clear in a way that feels almost cruel. Sunlight warming the stone steps where she stood yesterday, waiting for a man who never came. And she tells herself this is closure, that collecting these pieces will help her move forward. But when she turns toward the street, she sees him again, the stranger from the rain, leaning against a black sedan parked across the road, jacket pressed, posture relaxed but attentive, like someone who did not accidentally end up here. And her first instinct is to keep walking, because she does not have energy for conversations that begin with sympathy and end with nothing. Yet he straightens and speaks her name softly. Not loud enough to draw attention, just enough to let her know he remembers, and that alone stops her. He apologizes for waiting, says he did not want to intrude yesterday, says he thought she might want her things back without an audience, and she almost laughs at the precision of it, because he is right, because this is exactly what she needed, and still she keeps her guard up, clutching the box tighter as he offers to walk with her, not to fix anything, just to share the distance. They move at an even pace, the city waking around them. And when they reach the corner, he finally says there is something he wants to ask her, not as a favor, not as charity, but as a proposal that might sound unreasonable if he does not explain it properly. And Claire stops, her chest tightening, ready to refuse whatever comes next, because people do not approach women like her with solutions unless they expect something in return. He introduces himself fully this time, Ethan Cole, and explains that he is in a position where appearances matter more than he prefers, that there are expectations placed on him by investors and family structures he did not design, that he needs a wife on paper for a fixed period, not for affection or control, but for stability, and he says it plainly, without drama. 1 year, a legal marriage with clear terms, separate rooms, separate lives, public alignment only when necessary, financial support provided up front, and complete discretion guaranteed. Claire stares at him, certain she misheard, because men do not offer contracts like this to strangers without hidden traps. She asks him why her, and he answers with the kind of honesty that disarms. Because you did not know who I was yesterday, because you were humiliated and still stood tall, because you need time and I need structure, and because neither of us wants to pretend this is anything other than a transaction that could benefit us both. He hands her a slim folder, says she does not have to decide now, that she should have a lawyer review it, that walking away will not offend him. and Claire flips through the pages, scanning numbers that make her breath catch. Rent covered, debts addressed, a stipend that would erase the immediate panic she has been carrying since the altar, and she hates how quickly relief rises alongside suspicion. Hates that her first thought is how this would solve everything she cannot fix alone. She asks what he gets if she says no, and he smiles faintly, says then he will find another solution, but not one as clean, and not one he expects to trust as much. Silence stretches between them. Cars passing, people living lives untouched by this moment, and Claire feels the weight of choice pressed down on her. Because this is not romance. This is survival meeting opportunity in broad daylight. She asks one last question. What happens after the year is over? And Ethan answers without hesitation, the contract ends. We both walk away with what we needed, no obligation, no claims, no regrets. And as Claire looks down at the folder again, she understands that this is the line she never expected to cross, but also the first time since yesterday that the future does not look like a closed door, and she tells him she will think about it, not because she doubts the math, but because agreeing would mean rewriting the story everyone thinks they know about her. And Ethan nods, stepping back, giving her space once more, leaving her with a decision that feels impossible and inevitable at the same time. 2 days later, Claire Whitman sits in a quiet conference room on the 10th floor of a downtown office building with a legal pad in front of her and a paper cup of lukewarm coffee she has not touched, the city visible through the glass walls like a reminder that life keeps moving whether she is ready or not. Her attorney having just finished reading the last page of the contract out loud, his tone careful, neutral, professional. And when he looks up, he tells her the agreement is unusually clean. No hidden clauses, no vague language. Everything defined down to timelines and exit conditions, which somehow makes the decision feel heavier, because there is nothing to fight against except herself. Ethan Cole sits across from her, jacket folded over the chair, sleeves rolled just enough to signal this is business, not ceremony. And he does not interrupt or rush her. He simply waits, hands resting loosely on the table. As if time is not the currency he trades in, Claire flips back through the pages again, reading the rules she already knows by heart. 1-year fixed term, no romantic obligation, no physical expectations beyond what is socially appropriate, separate bedrooms, independent finances except for agreed support, full transparency on public appearances, and a confidentiality clause that protects them both. She clears her throat and asks what happens if one of them breaks the rules. And Ethan answers evenly that the contract dissolves with predefined compensation, no penalties beyond what is written, no retaliation, no control. And that word control catches her attention, because it is the one thing she is afraid of losing. She asks why he is willing to risk this with a stranger, and he answers that strangers are often safer than people who think they know you. The silence that follows is not awkward but weighted, and Claire realizes she is waiting for her fear to stop screaming, but it does not. It simply changes shape, becoming a quieter voice that says, doing nothing is also a choice, one that will cost her just as much. She thinks about Monday morning, about walking into work pretending everything is fine while wondering how long she can keep the lights on. She thinks about the altar, about how easily promises disappear when they are no longer convenient, and she straightens in her chair, lifts the pen, then pauses, setting it down again, asking for one more condition, that her work life remains untouched, that he never interferes with her job, her performance, or her independence. Ethan does not hesitate, nodding once, agreeing to add it in writing, and when the amendment is typed and printed, she reads it twice, then signs her name slowly, deliberately, like she is crossing a bridge she cannot uncross. Ethan signs next, his signature confident but unshowy. And when he slides the final copy toward her, he says, welcome to the most honest arrangement either of us has probably ever been in, which almost makes her smile. They leave the building together, but not side by side, keeping distance for appearances even now. And later that afternoon, they stand in a small civil office with neutral walls and a clerk who does not ask questions, exchanging vows stripped of romance and filled with intention, the words feeling strange and solid at the same time. And when it is over, there is no kiss, no applause, just a quiet acknowledgement. Outside, Ethan hands her a set of keys, explains which door leads to which wing of the house, what nights they are expected to attend events, what stories they will tell if asked, and Claire listens, absorbing the shape of her new reality, aware that she is calmer than she expected to be, because for the first time since the chapel she knows where she will sleep, how she will pay her bills, and what the rules are. And as she sits alone later that night in a guest room that feels more like a hotel than a home, she places the signed contract in her bag, understanding that this marriage did not begin with love, but with clarity, and that clarity, at least for now, feels like safety. The weeks that follow settle into a rhythm Claire Whitman did not expect, one defined not by romance, but by structure. Mornings where she wakes early in the guest wing of the house and learns the quiet map of it, the way the coffee machine hums at 6:30, the way sunlight hits the marble counter near the back windows, the way Ethan Cole leaves precisely at 7:15 without fail, always dressed impeccably, always offering a brief nod and a neutral good morning that carries no obligation beyond courtesy. And at first Claire mistakes the calm for distance, but she soon understands it is intention, that this arrangement works because everything has a place. Her first official appearance as Mrs. Cole happens at a small charity dinner 2 weeks in. Nothing grand, just a room of donors and polite conversation. And Claire spends the afternoon with a stylist Ethan hired not to transform her, but to refine her, choosing a dress that fits without erasing her, coaching her on the language of these rooms, where to stand, when to smile, when to listen, and Claire absorbs it quickly, not because she wants to belong here, but because she refuses to be the weakest link. The dinner goes smoothly. Ethan introduces her with measured warmth. She responds with confidence she did not know she had, and later in the car he thanks her for being precise, a word that feels like respect. Back at the house they return to separate corridors without ceremony, and Claire realizes she does not feel dismissed. She feels trusted. Days blend into weeks. Her job continues uninterrupted. She arrives at the office early, leaves late, grateful that nothing there has changed, unaware of how close her worlds truly are. At home, she learns Ethan's habits without trying. The way he reads reports at the kitchen island late at night, the way he loosens his tie when thinking, the way he never raises his voice, even on difficult calls, and sometimes they share quiet meals when schedules align. Conversations practical and contained, about logistics, travel, expectations. Yet beneath it all Claire senses a consistency that feels rare. He does what he says he will do. He never surprises her with demands, never uses their marriage as leverage. And in return she shows up prepared, composed, unembarrassed by her past, and it begins to change something subtle in her posture, the way she moves through rooms, the way she speaks, not louder but steadier. One evening she finds a checkbook left deliberately on the counter with a note that reads rent and outstanding balances as agreed, and she pauses, swallowing hard, not because she feels owned, but because relief has weight, because having room to breathe makes her kinder to herself. She insists on keeping receipts, on accounting for every dollar, and Ethan accepts this without argument, which surprises her more than the money ever could. As the months pass, the house becomes familiar without becoming intimate, boundaries honored on both sides, and Claire begins to understand that this was never about pretending to be in love. It was about learning how two strangers can coexist with dignity, how power can be quiet, how safety can exist without control. And though she does not name it yet, she feels the faint beginning of something else, not desire, not trust, but curiosity, the kind that grows when nothing is forced, and everything is exactly as promised. The reveal comes on an evening Claire Whitman has prepared for like any other obligation, a black tie gala downtown benefiting a medical research foundation, her schedule reviewed, dress approved, posture practiced, the role clear, supportive wife, present but unobtrusive. And yet from the moment they step into the grand ballroom, she senses a shift, the air heavier, conversations tightening as people notice Ethan Cole enter, heads turning not toward her but toward him, and she tells herself, this is normal, that wealthy circles are insular, that influence travels faster than introductions. But as they move deeper into the room, she hears his name repeated with a reverence that feels unfamiliar. Donors approaching not to greet but to defer, hands extended with a careful eagerness, and Ethan responds with calm authority, greeting some by first name, acknowledging others with brief nods, his attention divided yet precise. And Claire feels a faint unease she cannot place, the stage. lights dimming as the host takes the microphone, thanking sponsors, listing achievements. And when the spotlight shifts to their table, the host's voice grows warmer, more formal, announcing a special recognition for leadership and vision, and then says it clearly, unmistakably. Please welcome Ethan Cole, Chief Executive Officer of Cole Industries. And in that instant the room erupts into applause while Claire freezes, the words landing too cleanly to misunderstand. Chief Executive Officer, not consultant, not partner, not investor, but the center, the name behind the building she passes every morning on her commute, the company whose quarterly updates she has typed and filed without ever seeing the face at the top. And Ethan rises smoothly, offering her a brief look that is not apologetic, but steady, as if he knew this moment would come and trusted her to handle it. He walks to the stage, delivers remarks that are concise and thoughtful, speaking about responsibility, about long-term impact, about investing in people rather than appearances, and the audience listens like this is gospel. And Claire sits perfectly still, clapping when appropriate, smiling when cameras pass, her mind racing backward through every interaction, every contract clause, every calm refusal to use power. Realizing now that the restraint was not modesty but choice, the applause swells. The host praises his success, his discretion, his reputation as one of the most influential executives on the East Coast, and Claire feels the ground shift beneath her carefully rebuilt sense of safety, because this changes the scale of everything. When Ethan returns to the table, he thanks her quietly for being composed, asks if she would like to leave early, and she nods, unable to trust her voice. The car ride home is silent, not tense but dense, and when they arrive she does not head toward her wing. Instead she stops in the foyer and asks him directly why he did not tell her. Ethan does not deflect. He answers that he told her what mattered for the contract, that his position would not affect the terms, that revealing it earlier would have changed the nature of her consent, and that he needed to know she chose the agreement without the weight of his status. Claire absorbs this, anger flickering. Minutes, everything holds. The familiar hum of printers, the receptionist nodding hello, her desk exactly as she left it, until a calendar alert pops up reminding her of an all-hands executive meeting moved to 9 sharp in the main conference room, a change she did not schedule, and as she gathers her notebook and tablet, she feels the unease return, not panic but pressure, the kind that precedes impact. The conference room is already filling when she arrives, department heads taking seats, quiet conversations cutting off when the door opens again, and Claire takes her place along the wall, ready to take notes, ready to be invisible, until the room stills completely. The door at the front opening as Ethan Cole walks in, no jacket this time, sleeves rolled, presence undeniable, and the managing director rises immediately, greeting him with deference that leaves no room for interpretation. Welcome back, sir. And in that second the truth lands with surgical clarity. This is not overlap. This is hierarchy. This is not coincidence. This is her world folding into his. Ethan takes the seat at the head of the table, nods once, thanks everyone for adjusting their schedules, and begins the meeting with calm efficiency, reviewing numbers, asking pointed questions, making decisions that ripple across the room. And Claire stands frozen, pen hovering uselessly over paper, her mind replaying every clause she insisted on, every promise about separation, about independence, about no interference. And yet here he is, not interfering, simply existing in a role that now redefines hers. When the meeting ends and the room empties faster than usual, Claire remains, her pulse steady but cold. And when the door closes behind the last executive, Ethan looks at her, not as her husband, not as a stranger, but as her superior, and says, "Good morning, Claire. Thank you for staying." The words hit harder than any raised voice could. She asks him quietly if this is real, if this is some elaborate test she was never told about, and Ethan answers that it has always been real, that Cole Industries is his, that he built it over 15 years, that the secretary role she holds exists in a structure he designed, but does not manage day to day, and that he never placed her there or influenced her hiring. Claire listens, anger sharpening into something focused, because while none of this violates the letter of their agreement, it strains the spirit of it. She tells him he should have told her, that knowing this changes everything, and Ethan agrees, acknowledging the omission without defensiveness, saying he feared that if she knew, she would doubt every kindness, every protection, wondering whether it came from affection or authority. And Claire counters that now she doubts anyway. Because power does not disappear just because it is not used. The silence stretches, charged, but controlled. And Ethan finally says something that stops her, that her job performance will be evaluated by her direct supervisor as outlined, that he will recuse himself from any decisions involving her role, and that if she wishes to leave the company, he will support that transition without consequence, not as her boss, not as her husband, but as a man honoring his word. Claire absorbs this, the choice heavy in her hands, because walking away would mean starting over again, and staying would mean trusting that restraint can exist where power does. She gathers her things and tells him she needs time. And as she leaves the room, she realizes that the safety she felt before was never about certainty. It was about believing the rules were equal, and now she must decide whether equality can survive the truth, or whether this second reveal has finally tipped the balance beyond repair. Claire Whitman does not go home that night, choosing instead to walk the long way through the city until the noise settles her thoughts, past storefronts and lit windows that remind her how many lives continue untouched by hidden power or broken expectations. And by the time she reaches the river, the decision has not formed, but the question has, whether trust can exist when truth arrives late. The next day, she requests a meeting with Ethan Cole, not at the office or the house, but at a neutral place, a quiet cafe near the water where no one knows either of them. And when he arrives, he does not bring documents or assistance, just himself, sitting across from her with the same measured calm. Claire does not raise her voice or accuse. She speaks plainly, telling him that what unsettled her was not his wealth or authority, but the imbalance created by knowing after the fact, by realizing that every safe boundary had existed inside a larger structure she did not see. Ethan listens without interruption, then answers with a truth he has never said aloud, that he learned early power makes honesty expensive, that revealing himself too soon has cost him sincerity before, that people adjust their behavior around him until he cannot tell who they are anymore, and that when he met her at the chapel he wanted one thing, consent untainted by influence. Claire absorbs this, recognizing the logic even as it stings. She tells him that intention does not erase impact, that she has worked too hard to rebuild herself to become a symbol or a secret, and Ethan responds by sliding something across the table, not a check or an amendment, but the original contract, already marked, a termination clause activated effective immediately if she chooses, with full financial support as outlined, and an additional letter he has drafted to her company stating that her departure or continued employment will not reflect on her performance, that the choice will be hers alone, no pressure, no negotiation. He tells her that he will honor whatever she decides without appeal, that the marriage was meant to give her time, not trap her inside gratitude. Claire studies the pages, feeling the weight lift slightly, because this is the first time since the reveal that power has been placed back in her hands without condition. She asks him why he would risk losing her, and he answers simply that real consent must be ongoing, not captured once and defended forever. The words land quietly but decisively, and Claire realizes this is the moment the arrangement changes shape, not from contract to romance, but from control to choice. She asks for space, days not hours, and Ethan agrees, standing first, leaving the contract with her, not pushing for resolution. Over the next week, Claire moves through her life with clarity she did not expect, going to work where she remains professionally untouched, returning to the house where she feels less like a guest and more like an equal observer. And at night, she rereads the contract not as a shield, but as a measure of intent, seeing where it protected her and where it fell short. Finally, she understands that what she feared most was not his power but her own silence, the way she once stood at an altar waiting for someone else to choose her. And when she meets Ethan again, she does not come with anger or surrender. She comes with decision, telling him she will stay not because she needs the money or the safety, but because she chooses to see who he is when nothing binds her. And Ethan accepts this without triumph, only relief, acknowledging that this time the terms are different, because for the first time the contract is not what keeps them together, her choice is. The year does not end with a deadline, but with a quiet morning when Claire Whitman wakes before the alarm and realizes the contract date has passed without either of them mentioning it. The house familiar now not because it is large, but because it holds routines they built carefully. And when she finds Ethan Cole in the kitchen reading reports, she tells him simply that the term is over. He closes the folder without argument and asks what she wants next, not what is convenient or safe, but what is true. And the simplicity of the question steadies her, because she has learned the difference between being chosen and choosing. She tells him she wants to stay, not as an obligation or an extension, but as a partner who can leave if she ever needs to, and Ethan nods, absorbing this as a responsibility rather than a victory. Later that day they walk along the river where the city softens into light and movement, the same place where she once sorted fear into steps, and Ethan stops near the water, not kneeling, not performing, just facing her fully. He tells her he does not want to renegotiate love the way he once negotiated safety, that if they move forward it will be without leverage or timelines, that she owes him nothing beyond honesty. And Claire feels the weight of the past loosen, the altar that once defined her shrinking into context, because the promise she broke that day was not to a man but to herself. And now she is keeping it. Ethan reaches into his coat and brings out a simple ring, not extravagant, chosen with care rather than display, and he asks her to marry him again, this time without contracts or witnesses or explanations, just the shared work of choosing each other every day. Claire does not answer immediately. She breathes, taking in the sound of the water, the city behind them, the life she rebuilt piece by piece. And then she says yes, not because she needs rescue, but because she wants the future they have learned how to make. They do not rush to announce it. They tell her parents over dinner, quietly, honestly. They tell colleagues when necessary without spectacle. And Claire continues her work on her own terms, eventually moving into a role that reflects her skill rather than her proximity. Ethan steps back, where he should, and forward where invited. And the power between them settles into balance not because it disappeared, but because it is shared openly. Months later they stand in a small gallery space filled with light and familiar faces, exchanging vows written by hand, promises about listening, about leaving room, about never hiding what matters. And when Claire looks at Ethan, she sees not the stranger who offered her survival or the executive who withheld his name, but the man who learned to trust her choice as much as she learned to trust his restraint. And as they leave together, she understands that being abandoned once taught her what not to accept, but being chosen after taught her something better. That love is not the absence of power, but the willingness to lay it down. And this time she walks forward knowing exactly why she is there.